Okay, I want you to imagine a scenario that top military strategists have literally been running simulations on for 2 decades. We're talking 20 years of running the exact same conflict over and over, modeling every possible tactical move and political countermove you can think of.
And you know what the most terrifying result of all these decades of simulations is? The attacking force completely loses track of enough enriched material to build 16 nuclear weapons. 16! The military targets are completely destroyed, sure, but the strategic danger? It actually multiplies.
So welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking an incredibly complex and honestly rapidly unfolding crisis, and we're doing it using an impartial, purely strategic framework developed by Professor Robert Pape. This is a guy who has spent over 30 years studying air power, military strategy, and advising the absolute highest levels of government. So through his analytical lens, we're going to look past the breaking news to really understand the underlying mechanics of modern warfare and geopolitical strategy.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to look at the missing nuclear bombs, the smart bomb trap, the regime matrix, stage 3, which is boots on the ground, and finally, the global and domestic fallout.
All right, let's start with Section 1, the missing nuclear bombs, the first paradox. To really understand what's happening on the ground here, we have to look at a concept Professor Pape calls the escalation trap. What is it? Well, it's a strategic dynamic where tactical military success actually kicks off a vicious cycle of political and military escalation. Basically, the attacker gets exactly what they want in the short term, but it leads to long-term strategic failure and ultimately a complete loss of control. Because, dropping smart bombs doesn't just destroy concrete and steel. It fundamentally changes the politics of the enemy. Think about this immediate paradox. You fly in these advanced stealth bombers. You execute the mission flawlessly. Literally 100% of the physical targets are destroyed. But here's the critical question. What happens when you destroy the building, but the highly dangerous enriched uranium inside has already been loaded onto trucks and dispersed across a massive, deeply hostile country? Well, tactical success creates strategic panic. You've won the battle of the bomb, right? But you've lost track of the exact material you went in to secure in the first place.
Moving on to Section 2, the smart bomb trap, a cycle of escalation.
Let's trace exactly how this escalation spirals, looking at this timeline we pulled from the source data. So in June, initial bombings take place at key nuclear facilities. But instead of just giving up, the target nation responds post-June with what strategists call horizontal escalation, specifically using drone strikes. Now fast forward to late February. An alternative deal is rejected and the attacking force decides, okay, we're shifting to a strategy of regime change. Almost immediately on February 28th, the enemy significantly ramps up those drone strikes on neighboring coalition partners. The whole escalation is rapid, it's reactive, and honestly, it's entirely predictable. And this whole sequence brilliantly illustrates the exact steps of horizontal escalation. Step 1, you hit the enemy's military target perfectly. Step 2, they know for a fact they can't fight advanced fighter jets head-on, so what do? They respond horizontally. They deploy precision drones to hit softer targets. Which brings us to Step 3. Coalition tourism and economies begin to take a massive hit. Our sources actually note these crazy micro-narratives of tourists literally fleeing luxury destinations like Dubai and international businesses just panicking. The enemy basically drives a wedge into the coalition by attacking the region's economic lifeblood.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is Section 3, the regime matrix, adaptive corporate style.
There's this massive public misconception about how adversarial regimes actually function. I think we all tend to picture them as these brittle, top-down structures, kind of like a game of Jenga, right? Where if you just pull out the top block, the leader, the whole tower falls down and the war ends. But the strategic reality? It's completely different. These regimes are highly adaptive matrices. They operate way more like a complex, modern corporate structure. When you remove a leader, the system just adapts. It fills the hole. And historically, it actually promotes harder, much more aggressive successors who feel they have to prove their strength.
And the crucial point here is looking at the unintended consequences of assassination. Impartially speaking, just looking at the structural data, removing a supreme leader actually eliminated a vital guardrail. Think about this. The previous leader had issued religious edicts, fatwas, specifically against nuclear weaponization. By taking him out, that guardrail's just gone. In his place, you promote an aggressive successor who desperately needs to prove himself to his base. You empower elite military factions like the Revolutionary Guard, which is a force over 150,000 strong, by the way. So by attempting to decapitate the regime, the strategic outcome is a tougher, more resilient, and far more aggressive adversary.
All right, let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. Stage 3, boots on ground.
As Professor Pape notes in our source material, and this is a direct quote, "We will start to worry as each week goes by that will push us to the ground options. The intense, growing fear that dispersed nuclear material might fall into the hands of terror networks creates this absolutely unbearable political pressure. I mean, you simply cannot find hidden enriched uranium from 30,000 feet in the air. Eventually, the attacker's hand is forced."
Because hunting for dispersed uranium, it's not some quick in-and-out surgical mission. It requires specialized ground forces like the 82nd Airborne to drop in and physically occupy hostile territory. Just try to imagine thousands of soldiers having to lock down and meticulously search an area the size of the Los Angeles International Airport. And not just for an afternoon, but for weeks, maybe months, all while being completely surrounded by a deeply hostile population and a million-man army. That is the true, terrifying cost of Stage 3.
Which brings us to our final section. Section 5, Global and Domestic, the Fallout.
When superpowers get bogged down in these escalation traps, the entire geopolitical board shifts, and it shifts dramatically. Take China, for example. They completely thrive on the distraction. While the attacking power is bogged down in the Middle East, Chinese cities like Wuhan are rapidly accelerating their artificial intelligence and robotics industries, entirely undisturbed. Meanwhile, Russia capitalizes on the chaos, trading drone-targeting intelligence with the enemy just to stretch their rival even further. And the global economy? Well, a single drone strike near oil choke points in the Strait of Hormuz immediately chokes supply and drives up global inflation for everyone.
And that foreign policy trap, it hits right at home. The domestic impacts of forever wars are immediate, and they are severely felt by the average citizen. We're talking immediate gas price spikes at the pump. We see a resurgence of inflation and economic risk that absolutely terrifies businesses. The national debt escalates. But perhaps most concerning of all, according to the research, is the normalization of political violence at home. Prolonged foreign conflict and domestic economic stress actually mirror and fuel deep polarization and unrest right within our own borders.
Which leaves us with a profound and really provocative question to consider as we wrap up today. As we pour massive resources into these foreign escalation traps, endlessly chasing perfect security abroad, are we ignoring the greatest threat? Are we, through our own strategic choices and the resulting domestic fallout, actually becoming our own worst enemies? It's a strategic reality that demands our focused attention. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structured look at the data gives you a clearer framework for understanding the wildly complex world around us. See you next time.